Every morning the girl helped the sick millionaire. She kept him company in a square while he sat on a bench with his oxygen tank, until one day his lawyers knocked on her door with news that would change everything. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Lucy Harper was only 6 years old the morning she first noticed the man who would change her life forever. It was a Tuesday in late September, and the maple trees in Riverside Park were just beginning to turn gold. Lucy walked beside her grandfather, George, as they took their usual shortcut through the park on the way to her elementary school. George worked the night shift at the warehouse and had exactly 45 minutes to get Lucy to school before he had to start his second job at the hardware store downtown. "Grandpa, look," Lucy whispered, tugging on George's calloused hand. "That man looks so sad." George followed her gaze to a park bench near the old fountain. A man sat there, maybe in his early 30s, dressed in an expensive-looking grey cardigan, despite the warm morning. What caught George's attention wasn't the man's clothes. It was the portable oxygen tank beside him, connected by a thin tube to his nose. The man stared at the fountain with hollow eyes, his thin frame almost disappearing into the bench. "Come on, sweet pea," George said gently, trying to redirect Lucy. "We can't be late." But Lucy had already slipped her hand free and was walking toward the bench. George's heart sank. This was exactly like his late wife Margaret. That same stubborn kindness that couldn't pass by anyone in need. "Hello," Lucy said softly as she reached the bench. "Are you okay?" The man turned slowly, and up close, George could see how illness had ravaged him. His skin was pale as paper, dark circles carved deep under his eyes. But when he looked at Lucy, something shifted in his expression, a flicker of surprise, maybe even warmth. The man's voice was barely a whisper, weak and strained. "I'm okay, little one. Thank you for asking." Lucy studied him with the uncomplicated concern only children possess. "You have an OE." She pointed at the oxygen tank. A sad smile crossed the man's face. Something like that. "My grandpa says when you have an OE, you need someone to sit with you so you don't feel lonely." Lucy looked back at George, who stood a few feet away, torn between rushing to his jobs and this unexpected moment. "Right, Grandpa?" George checked his watch. They were going to be late. But looking at his granddaughter's earnest face, then at the profound loneliness in the sick man's eyes, he found himself nodding. "That's right, Lucy. I have to go to school," Lucy told the man seriously. "But I come through here every morning. Will you be here tomorrow?" The man seemed to struggle with emotion. His eyes grew wet, and he had to clear his throat twice before speaking. I might be." "Good," Lucy beamed. "Because everyone needs a friend. That's what my mama used to say before she went to heaven." George's chest tightened. Lucy rarely mentioned her mother, his daughter, who died in a car accident 2 years ago. The pain was still too raw, too big for such a small girl to carry. The man on the bench seemed equally moved. "Your mama was very wise," he managed to say. "I'm Lucy Harper. What's your name?" "William," the man replied, his voice breaking slightly. "William Chase." "Okay, Mr. William, I'll see you tomorrow." Lucy waved and skipped back to George, who gave William an apologetic nod before they hurried on. As they walked away, George glanced back once. William Chase sat perfectly still on that bench, his hand pressed to his chest, watching Lucy's retreating figure with an expression George couldn't quite read. It looked almost like hope, or perhaps like a man seeing something precious he thought he'd lost forever. That night, after George collapsed into bed for a few hours of sleep between his second and third jobs, he found Lucy sitting at the kitchen table with her crayons, drawing a picture of a stick figure on a park bench next to a little girl. Above them, she'd drawn a large, smiling sun. "That's for Mr. William," Lucy explained, "so he remembers he's not alone." George's eyes stung with tears he wouldn't let fall. His granddaughter had inherited her grandmother's enormous heart, and in this harsh world, he wasn't sure if that was a blessing or a curse. What George didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that William Chase was more than just a sick man on a bench. He was the founder of Chase Industries, worth over $40 million, and according to his doctors, he had exactly 3 days left to live. William had come to that bench because it was where his mother used to bring him as a child. Before cancer took her when he was Lucy's age, he'd come there to die in the place where he'd last felt truly loved. But then, a little girl with her grandmother's eyes had asked if he was okay. And William Chase, for the first time in months, had a reason to want to see tomorrow. The next morning, Lucy practically dragged George through the park gates. His bones ached from only 4 hours of sleep between shifts at the warehouse and hardware store. But seeing Lucy's excitement made it worthwhile. William was there, sitting straighter this time. He'd combed his hair. The oxygen tank still hissed softly, but his eyes brightened when he saw Lucy approaching. "Mr. William," Lucy ran up with her crayon drawing. "I made this for you." William took the picture with trembling fingers, studying the stick figures and bright yellow sun. His throat worked with emotion. "This is the most beautiful thing anyone's given me in a very long time," he whispered. "Thank you, Lucy." Lucy climbed onto the bench beside him. "Do you come here every day?" "I used to come here with my mother, a long time ago, before I lost her." "My mama's in heaven too," Lucy said matter-of-factly. "Grandpa says she watches over us. Maybe your mama watches over you too." William's composure cracked. "Maybe she does," he managed. As they left, Lucy called back, "I'll see you tomorrow, Mr. William, every morning." George could have sworn he saw tears streaming down William's face. That evening, across town in a penthouse overlooking the city, William sat in his study with Lucy's drawing on his desk. His attorney, Richard Morrison, sat across from him. "William, you need to finalize your will," Richard said carefully. "The doctors were clear, 3 days." "I don't have any family," William said, staring at the drawing. "No wife, no children. What does any of it matter?" $42 million matters, William. Your company employs 300 people. You can't let it all dissolve into probate. William touched the drawing, tracing the stick figure. "There's this child. She stops to talk to me in the park. 6 years old, Richard, and she asks if I'm okay." Richard waited, sensing something profound. "For 3 months I've been dying. Friends disappeared. Business associates stopped calling. I became invisible, a ghost in an expensive apartment." William's voice grew stronger. "But this little girl sees me. Every morning she asks if I'm okay. She drew me a picture so I wouldn't feel alone." "I may find out everything about her," William said suddenly. "Her name is Lucy Harper. She lives with her grandfather George. I want to know their situation, discreetly." Richard made notes. "And then what?" William looked at the drawing, at the symbol of hope from a child who chose kindness despite every reason to be bitter. "Then we'll see. I have 3 days, Richard. Maybe I can do something meaningful with them." After Richard left, William sat alone in his enormous penthouse. For the first time since his diagnosis, he didn't feel ready to give up. A 6-year-old girl with a crayon drawing had given him something he thought he'd lost forever, a reason to fight for one more sunrise. By Thursday morning, visiting William had become Lucy's favorite part of the day. She carried a small paper bag as they walked through the park. "I brought Mr. William a cookie," Lucy announced. "I saved it from lunch yesterday." George's heart ached. Lucy rarely got treats, but she'd saved her only cookie for a stranger. Margaret would have been proud. William looked better. He'd shaved and his expression was less hollow. "Good morning, Lucy," he said warmly as she climbed onto the bench. Lucy handed him the slightly crushed cookie. "I saved it special. Grandpa says sharing is what makes us rich, even when we don't have much money." William's expression filled with wonder. He took a small bite, savoring it. "This means more to me than you know." While Lucy chatted about school, George checked his watch nervously, 15 minutes before his hardware store shift started. "Grandpa works really hard," Lucy explained to William. "He has 3 jobs. He's the hardest worker in the whole world." George flushed. "Lucy, sweet pea." William studied George intently. 3 jobs is remarkable. You must be very dedicated." "She's all I got," George said simply. "Her mama, my daughter Sarah, passed 2 years ago, car accident. Lucy's daddy wasn't in the picture, so it's just us now." "I'm sorry," William said with genuine empathy. "Losing a child, I can't imagine." After they left, George didn't notice the well-dressed man photographing them from behind a tree, or following them to Lucy's school and then to the hardware store. Richard Morrison was thorough. By afternoon, he had a complete picture of their lives, and it broke his heart. George Harper, 68, widower. Wife Margaret died of cancer 5 years ago. Daughter Sarah killed in a hit-and-run 2 years later. George worked 65 hours weekly across 3 jobs, barely covering rent on their tiny apartment. Lucy slept on the couch. Medical debt from Margaret's cancer would take 20 years to clear at $50 monthly. Lucy's school records showed a bright, kind child who often arrived without proper supplies. Teachers noted she frequently shared her lunch, despite having little herself. She'd worn the same 2 outfits for 6 months. That evening, Richard presented the folder to William, who read every page in silence. "That man is killing himself to give that little girl a life," William finally said. 3 jobs at 68. Medical debt he'll never escape. And Lucy gives away her lunch, shares her only cookie. "It's a difficult situation," Richard agreed. "It's impossible." Fire lit William's eyes for the first time since his diagnosis. That child brings joy to a dying stranger every morning. She has every reason to be bitter, but she chooses kindness, and her grandfather is working himself to death. William picked up Lucy's crayon drawing. "I spent my life building an empire for what? I'm dying alone in a tower, leaving nothing meaningful, but they're living with purpose every single day." "What are you thinking, William?" "I'm thinking those 2 people have given me more in 3 days than anyone has in 3 months. They've given me hope, Richard. The least I can do is give them a future." That night, William made a decision that would change everything. He called Richard with specific instructions that would transform Lucy Harper's life and reveal secrets that would shake both their worlds. Friday morning brought cold rain. George assumed they'd skip the park, but Lucy was adamant. "We have to check on Mr. William. What if he's alone in the rain?" They found William on the bench under a large umbrella, looking worse, paler, more drawn. The oxygen tank hissed louder. "Mr. William!" Lucy rushed forward. "You shouldn't be out here, you'll get sicker." William smiled weakly. "I couldn't miss our morning visit. It's the best part of my day." Lucy tucked herself under his umbrella. "Grandpa, can we stay a little bit?" George checked his watch, already late, but looking at William's grateful face and Lucy's concern, he nodded. "Just a few minutes, sweet pea." "Your grandfather is very kind," William said. "Not everyone would take time for a stranger." "You're not a stranger," Lucy said simply. "You're our friend." William's eyes filled with tears. He turned away, shoulders shaking with emotion. "Mr. William?" Lucy's voice was worried. "These are happy tears, Lucy. You've made me very happy." Lucy hugged him then, wrapped her small arms around his frail frame. William froze, then slowly hugged her back. George saw the man's face crumple with years of loneliness breaking open. When they pulled apart, William gave Lucy a shaky smile. "You're a very special little girl." He reached into his pocket and handed George a business card. "This is my attorney, Richard Morrison. If you ever need anything at all, please call him." George took the card, confused. "Mr. Chase, I don't understand." Just keep it, please." After they left, William pulled out his phone. "Richard, it's time. Draw up the papers today, everything we discussed." "William, are you certain? This is massive." "Maybe take more time." "I don't have more time," William interrupted. "The doctors said until Sunday, maybe Monday. I want the papers ready by tomorrow evening." "You barely know these people." "I know enough." William's voice was firm. "That little girl has more goodness than most people have in their entire souls. Her grandfather is sacrificing everything. They deserve better, Richard, and I can change that." Long pause. "I'll have everything ready, but what if they refuse?" William looked at Lucy's drawing in its protective sleeve. "Then we'll find a way anyway. Before I leave this world, I want to do one purely good thing. I want to help them because they helped me see that life still matters in my final days. I'll have the papers ready." After the call, William sat in the rain, his heart full for the first time in months. He knew people would question his judgment, that he barely knew Lucy and George, that grief and illness clouded his thinking. But William had built a fortune, trusting his instincts, and every instinct told him Lucy Harper and her grandfather deserved a miracle, even if that miracle came from a dying millionaire on a park bench. Saturday morning, George woke to Lucy singing in their tiny kitchen, arranging their last 2 slices of bread beside a bruised apple. "Good morning, Grandpa. I made us a feast." George's heart twisted. His paycheck wouldn't come until Tuesday. They were down to almost nothing. "Looks delicious, sweet pea." After breakfast, George prepared for his church janitorial shift. Lucy usually came with him, playing quietly while he cleaned. "Can we see Mr. William first?" Lucy asked. "Just quick. They could spare 5 minutes. Quick visit," George agreed. William looked weaker, breathing labored, skin almost translucent. A well-dressed man with a briefcase sat beside him, standing when they approached. "Lucy! George!" William's face brightened despite his exhaustion. "Please meet my friend, Richard Morrison, my attorney." Richard extended his hand. "Mr. Harper, pleasure to meet you. William has told me so much about you and Lucy." George felt uncomfortable. What was an attorney doing here? "Mr. William looks really tired," Lucy said, climbing onto the bench with concern. "I am tired, sweet Lucy," William admitted, "but seeing you makes me feel better." Richard cleared his throat. "Mr. Harper, William asked me to be here because he has something important to discuss. Could we speak privately?" George glanced at his watch. 20 minutes until work. "I have to be at work." "This will only take a moment," Richard assured him. "It's quite important." George nodded to Lucy. "Stay with Mr. William, sweet pea." Richard led George aside and opened his briefcase. "Mr. Harper, I'll be direct. William Chase is not just a sick man. He's the founder and CEO of Chase Industries. He's worth over $42 million. George's mind went blank. "What?" "He came to this park because his mother used to bring him here before she died of cancer. He came to say goodbye." Richard's expression softened. "Then your granddaughter showed him kindness. She asked if he was okay, drew him a picture, saved her only cookie for him." George looked at Lucy, chattering with William. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because William has made a decision. He wants to provide for Lucy's future, a trust fund for her education, living expenses, everything she'll need." The words made no sense. "No, we can't accept that. We barely know him." "Mr. Harper, please listen," Richard interrupted gently. "William is dying. Perhaps 2 days left. He has no family. His fortune will go to charities, but he wants to do something personal, something that matters. Your granddaughter gave him hope. Please, let him do this." George's hand shook. "This is insane. People don't just give away fortunes. William Chase does," Richard said firmly. "The question is whether you'll let him help Lucy before it's too late." George looked at Lucy. Second-hand clothes, worn shoes, bright smile despite everything. He thought about 3 jobs killing him, medical debt, the childhood he couldn't provide. "How much?" George whispered. $5 million. Managed by trustees, released for education and expenses. Lucy would be financially secure for life. $5 million. Incomprehensible. "There's one condition," Richard continued. "William wants to meet with both of you tomorrow, Sunday afternoon at his penthouse. He wants to say goodbye to Lucy properly and explain everything himself. Tomorrow, but Sunday I work." "I think Pastor Reynolds will understand," Richard said gently. "Please, let William do this good thing before he goes." George looked at the business card William had given him. He looked at Lucy, who deserved so much more. He looked at William Chase, a dying millionaire who found meaning in a child's kindness. "Okay," George heard himself say. "Tomorrow." Richard's face flooded with relief. "Thank you. You've given William a great gift." As they walked back, George's mind reeled. A millionaire? $5 million? Impossible. But the hope in William's eyes when Richard nodded? That was real. "Everything okay, Grandpa?" Lucy asked. "Everything's fine. Mr. William wants us to visit him tomorrow at his house. Would you like that?" Lucy's face lit up. "Really? Can I bring him another picture?" "You can bring him anything you want," William said softly, voice thick with emotion. As George and Lucy hurried off, George's mind spun with questions. Why would a millionaire leave money to a child he'd known 4 days? What was the catch? What George didn't know was that tomorrow's meeting would reveal secrets that would change everything. Secrets about William's past, about George's daughter Sarah. Secrets that would transform their understanding of fate and the invisible threads binding human lives together. Sunday arrived with crystalline sunshine. George and Lucy stood outside the gleaming tower of Riverside Residences, both staring up at the building that scraped the sky. "Mr. William lives here?" Lucy whispered. "At the top?" The doorman checked his list, surprised. "Of course, Mr. Harper. Mr. Chase left explicit instructions. Follow me." The elevator opened directly into William's penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city. William sat in a wheelchair with his oxygen tank, looking worse, skin grey, breathing shallow. "Lucy! George!" His face lit up. "Thank you for coming." Lucy ran to him without hesitation. William hugged her carefully. A nurse monitored his vitals with concerned eyes. "Your house is beautiful," Lucy said, "but it's really big. Don't you get lonely?" William laughed, then coughed. "Yes, Lucy, very lonely. That's why your visits meant so much." Richard stepped forward. "Mr. Harper, let's step into the study. We have papers to review." In the study, Richard laid out overwhelming documents, trust agreements, portfolios, financial projections. $5 million for Lucy's education and living expenses, managed by trustees. She'll have access for education immediately, with larger distributions at 18, 25, and 30. "I still don't understand why," George said, voice breaking. "We're nobody to him." Richard was quiet, choosing words carefully. "William asked me to give you something first. He thought you had the right to know the full truth." He pulled out a manila envelope. Inside were photographs, old ones. George's breath stopped. The first showed a young woman with Lucy's exact smile, standing next to a healthy William Chase at a charity gala. Both laughing. George's daughter, Sarah. "What is this?" George's voice strangled. "Keep looking," Richard said gently. More photos. Sarah and William at a coffee shop, leaning toward each other with unmistakable love. Another at this park, the same bench, Sarah's head on William's shoulder. "No," George whispered. "Sarah never mentioned—" They dated for 6 months. 8 years ago, William was starting Chase Industries. Sarah worked at a non-profit downtown. They met at a fundraiser. George's hands shook violently. But Sarah was with Lucy's father came after William, Richard confirmed. The relationship ended badly. William was consumed with building his company. Sarah wanted something more stable. They broke up. She met Lucy's father months later. Why didn't she tell me? George's voice cracked. All those years, because it hurt her, because she loved him, and it didn't work out, and she moved on. Richard pulled out one more photograph, recent. William on the bench with Lucy, both smiling. Lucy's expression, her gestures, all so like her mother. When Lucy first approached William, he didn't recognize her, but something felt familiar. When I showed him Sarah's obituary, when he saw photos of Sarah's daughter, Richard's voice thickened. William realized the child showing him kindness was the daughter of the only woman he'd ever truly loved. George sank into a chair, tears streaming. Sarah, my Sarah knew him, and he never knew about Lucy until now. He's dying, Mr. Harper. His heart condition is terminal, the same genetic defect that killed his mother. Perhaps a day left, maybe 2. Richard leaned forward. He doesn't want Lucy to know about his history with her mother. It would be too confusing. But he wanted you to know, because this isn't from a stranger, it's from someone who loved Sarah deeply. Someone honoring her memory by caring for her daughter. George wept for his daughter gone too soon, for the secrets she'd carried, for William dying alone except for Lucy's kindness, for Lucy who would never know the full story. The papers, George managed. What do I need to sign? In the living room, Lucy showed William a new drawing, him standing healthy without the oxygen tank. That's how I imagine you in heaven. All better. William held the drawing with shaking hands, eyes brimming. It's perfect. Are you scared? Lucy asked bluntly. About going to heaven? William looked at this child, daughter of the woman who'd captured his heart, the girl who'd given his final days meaning. I'm not scared anymore. You help me see that some things last beyond our time here. Kindness lasts. Love lasts. Good, Lucy said, satisfied. She climbed carefully into his lap and hugged him. I'm going to miss you, Mr. William. William wrapped his arms around her, memorizing everything, her weight, her breathing, the pure love she offered. I'm going to miss you too, sweet girl, but I'll be watching over you, just like your mama. When George emerged, eyes red and swollen, Lucy looked concerned. Are you sad, Grandpa? Happy tears, George managed. Just happy tears, sweet pea. As they prepared to leave, William pulled George aside. Thank you for letting me do this, for bringing her to me these past days. You've given a dying man the greatest gift, purpose. Thank you, George said, voice breaking, for loving my daughter, for seeing her in Lucy, for caring about us. That night, George sat looking at the photographs Richard had let him keep. Sarah and William, young and in love. He'd never known. But somehow, 8 years later, Sarah's daughter had found the man her mother once loved, sitting alone on a bench, waiting to die. In finding him, Lucy gave him peace, and he gave them a future. George didn't believe in miracles, but looking at those photos, at the trust documents, at the impossible chain of events, he had to wonder. Maybe miracles were just love finding its way home, even if it took a lifetime to get there. Monday morning arrived with heavy clouds. George woke early, haunted by photographs of Sarah and William. His phone rang at 7. Richard Morrison's voice was strained. Mr. Harper, William's condition has deteriorated overnight. He's asked for you and Lucy. The doctors say it would be best to come now. George's heart dropped. We'll be there in 20 minutes. He woke Lucy gently. Mr. William is very sick and wants to see us. Lucy's eyes filled with tears. Is he going to heaven today, Grandpa? I think maybe he is, sweet pea. They arrived to find the penthouse transformed into a hospital room. Medical equipment beeped softly. William lay in bed, oxygen mask covering his face, skin the color of parchment. When he saw Lucy, his eyes brightened. "Lucy," he whispered, removing the mask, "my sweet girl." Lucy climbed carefully onto the bed, taking his hand. "I brought you a picture." She held up a drawing of a park bench with two stick figures surrounded by hearts. "It's us, best friends forever." William's eyes flooded with tears. He held the drawing to his chest. "Lucy, you gave me the greatest gift anyone could give. You showed me that kindness matters, that love matters. You reminded me what it means to be human." "You're the best friend I ever had," Lucy said, laying her head on his shoulder. "I wish you didn't have to go." "Me too, sweetheart." William looked at George. "Take care of her. She's so special, so much like Sarah," George finished quietly. "I'll take care of her, I promise." William's breathing became labored. "Lucy, promise me you'll always be kind. Promise you'll always see people who are invisible. Promise you'll use the gift I'm giving you to make the world better." "I promise," Lucy said solemnly. William smiled peacefully. "That's my girl." He looked at George. "In my desk drawer, there's an envelope for Lucy when she's older." They stayed another hour, Lucy telling him stories. William listened, eyes closed, smiling. At 9:15, his breathing changed. The nurse checked monitors and looked at Richard with silent communication. "Lucy," George said gently, "maybe we should let Mr. William rest. Just one more minute." Lucy leaned close. "Thank you for being my friend, Mr. William. I love you." William's eyes opened one last time. "I love you too, Lucy Harper. You saved me." His eyes found George. "Thank you for everything." George placed his hand on William's shoulder. "Thank you, William, for loving my daughter, for loving Lucy." William smiled, then his eyes closed. His breathing slowed. At 9:20 that Monday morning, with Lucy holding his hand, William Chase took his last breath. "He's in heaven now, isn't he, Grandpa?" "Yes, sweet pea," George said, pulling her close. "He's in heaven with your mama." Later that day, after everything was handled, Richard gave George the envelope from William's desk. Inside was a letter, "For Lucy, on her 18th birthday." And beneath it another, "For George to read now." George opened it with trembling hands. "George, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. These past days with Lucy have been the happiest of my life since I lost Sarah. Your daughter was the love of my life, and I was a fool to let ambition come before her. Finding Lucy, seeing Sarah in her, it felt like a second chance. Take care of that little girl. She has her mother's heart. Thank you for letting a dying man find meaning in his final days. With deepest gratitude, William." George folded the letter carefully. Outside, the clouds had parted and sunshine streamed through. Somewhere, somehow, Sarah and William were together again, at peace at last. The funeral was Thursday at St. Michael's Cathedral, the same church where George worked as janitor, but today he sat in the front row beside Lucy, both in their best clothes, which Richard had quietly arranged to purchase. The cathedral was packed. Hundreds filled the pews. Business associates, employees, board members, philanthropists. But in the front row sat a 68-year-old man and a 6-year-old girl who had known William Chase as a friend on a park bench. Lucy held George's hand throughout. When the pastor asked for memories, Lucy stood before George could stop her. Richard brought a microphone down. "Mr. William was my best friend," Lucy said, her small voice amplified. "He was sad and lonely, but he was always nice to me. He liked my drawings, and he taught me that even when you're sick and scared, you can still be kind. I'm going to miss him forever." There wasn't a dry eye in the cathedral. Several businessmen openly wept. This child had captured William Chase's essence better than any eulogy, As people filed past the casket, Lucy placed her final drawing on top, them as best friends forever, surrounded by hearts. "Goodbye, Mr. William. Say hi to my mama." George carried her out, both sobbing. In following days, Richard became a regular presence, helping George understand the trust structure. The trust provides for Lucy's education through college, monthly stipend for living expenses, milestone distributions at 18, 25, and 30. George shook his head in wonder. "I can't believe this is real. It's very real." William was extremely specific. Richard pulled out more documents. "There's also a provision for you, monthly payment while caring for Lucy, and your medical debt." William paid it off. All of it. George's hands flew to his face. "What?" "Every penny. Hospital bills, collections. William settled it all. You're debt-free, George." For the first time in 5 years, George could breathe. The crushing weight lifted. That weekend, Richard helped them move to a new apartment, a clean, safe 2-bedroom near an excellent school. Lucy would have her own room for the first time. As they unpacked, Lucy found a package addressed to her. Inside was a stuffed bear wearing a tiny oxygen mask and a note. "Dear Lucy, this is Courage Bear. When you miss me, hug him tight. He'll remind you to be brave and kind. Love, Mr. William." Lucy clutched the bear and cried. George held her, grieving together for the man who changed their lives. But in following weeks, something shifted. Lucy started at her new school with proper supplies and fitting clothes. She made friends easily. Her natural kindness attracted others. George, no longer killing himself with 3 jobs, had energy to actually be a grandfather. They had dinner together nightly. He helped with homework. They went to the park on weekends. One Saturday, they stopped at the bench where they'd met William. Someone had placed a memorial plaque in memory of William Chase, who found friendship on this bench. "Can we sit here?" Lucy asked. They sat watching autumn leaves fall. "Do you think Mr. William can see us?" "I think so, Sweet Pea. He's very proud of you." "I'm going to make him proud," Lucy said with determination. "I'm going to be kind to everyone, just like he taught me." A man approached, thin, haggard, clearly homeless. He looked at the plaque, then at them. "Sorry, I didn't mean to intrude. This is my usual spot." Lucy looked at him, really looked at him. "Are you okay?" The man seemed startled. Yeah, I'm okay, little one. You look sad. Would you like to sit with us? Nobody should be sad and alone." The man's eyes filled with tears. "That's very kind of you." As the man sat and Lucy began chattering about Courage Bear, George felt profound rightness. William's legacy wasn't just money. It was the lesson he'd taught Lucy, to see the invisible, to extend kindness without expecting anything back. Sitting on the bench where it all began, George understood. William hadn't just given them financial security. He'd given them something far more valuable: purpose. 3 months after William's death, their new life had settled into comfortable rhythm. Lucy thrived at school, George took a part-time bookstore job, and the trust provided everything they needed. Then one cold January morning, Richard Morrison appeared at their door with a grim expression and a man in an expensive suit. "George, we need to talk." "This is Marcus Webb, William's former business partner. He's filed a legal challenge to the trust." George's blood ran cold. "What kind of challenge?" Marcus stepped forward, voice smooth. "Mr. Harper, I respect what you and your granddaughter meant to William. However, I'm concerned he wasn't of sound mind when he created this trust. He was dying, on heavy medications, emotionally compromised. $5 million for a child he'd known less than a week isn't rational." "William was completely sound," Richard said sharply. "I have doctor's assessments, psychiatric evaluations." "Conducted by doctors he was paying," Marcus interrupted. "William built Chase Industries with me. We were partners 15 years. In his original will, he left a significant portion to expand the company, protect employees' jobs. Then, in his final days, he changes everything for a child he barely knew. George felt panic rising. He knew Lucy's mother. He loved her. Ah, yes, the mysterious romance from 8 years ago. Marcus's tone was skeptical. "Forgive me, but I've gone through William's personal effects. I find no evidence of this relationship with Sarah Harper. No photos, no correspondence, nothing." Richard's face reddened. William was a private person, or this romance is being exaggerated to justify an impulsive decision by a dying, medicated man emotionally manipulated by a child. Marcus's words were ice. "I'm not saying it was intentional, but a 6-year-old shows attention to a lonely, dying man, and suddenly he's rewriting his entire estate. That's not rational." George stood, shaking with anger. William loved Lucy. She gave him hope, which is exactly why the court should intervene. William was vulnerable, isolated, dying. The trust should be voided. "I'm willing to offer Lucy $100,000 for education. That's more than generous." "Get out," George said quietly. "Mr. Harper." "Get out!" George roared. "William made his choice. You don't get to take this away because you want more money." After Marcus left, Richard sat heavily. "I should have anticipated this. Marcus has standing as business partner and original beneficiary. This could go to probate court. What does that mean? Months, possibly years of legal battles. Lucy's trust could be frozen during investigation." Richard paused, pained. "We need to prove William's relationship with Sarah was real, that his decision was rational, that he wasn't unduly influenced." "But you have doctors' evaluations, which could be dismissed as biased. We need more. Evidence of William's connection to Sarah, proof this wasn't a whim." That night George couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the envelope William left for Lucy, marked for her 18th birthday. What if it contained proof? What if William anticipated this challenge? At 2 a.m., George made a decision. He retrieved the envelope from his safe and carefully opened it. Inside was a letter and a small box. George read with growing wonder, tears streaming. "My dearest Lucy," William had written. "If you're reading this, you're 18, and I've been gone 12 years. I hope you're still the kind, brave girl I knew. I left you the trust because your mother was the love of my life, and you showed me kindness, but there's something else you should know." The letter continued, revealing something George never suspected, something that changed everything. By morning, George knew exactly what to do. He called Richard immediately. "I need you to come over, now. William left something for Lucy, something that proves everything." "What is it?" Richard asked urgently. "Proof," George said simply. "Proof that William knew exactly what he was doing. Proof that Marcus Webb is about to lose everything." Richard Morrison arrived within the hour. George handed him William's letter and watched as the attorney's eyes widened with each paragraph. "My God," Richard whispered. "I didn't know. William never told me." The letter revealed a truth William had kept secret. 8 years ago, when Sarah broke up with William, she was pregnant. "I learned about the pregnancy 3 weeks after our breakup," William's letter explained. "Sarah called me, terrified. The father had abandoned her. We met at our bench. I told her I would take care of her, raise the baby together." George's hands shook. This was Lucy's story, her origin. "But Sarah refused," the letter continued. "She said she couldn't build a life with me based on obligation. She'd figure it out alone. I offered money, support. She walked away angry. I, proud and hurt, let her go. It was the worst mistake of my life. For 2 years, I tried to find Sarah, hired investigators, but she'd moved, changed her number. Then I learned she'd married someone else. I stopped searching. Then 3 months before my diagnosis, I received a letter from a hospital social worker. Sarah had been in a car accident. She was dying. The social worker found my contact in Sarah's effects, an old photo of us. Sarah had kept it all those years. George gasped. I went to the hospital immediately, William continued. Sarah was barely conscious. She said, I'm sorry I didn't let you help. She told me about you, Lucy. She named you after my mother. Lucy was my mother's name. She asked me to watch over you if anything happened. Tears streamed down George's face. I promised I would, but then she died, and I learned George Harper had taken custody. The social worker said you were in good hands, that your grandfather loved you fiercely. I thought, what right do I have to interfere? So I stepped back. And then I was diagnosed. Terminal. 6 months to live. I had built an empire for what? I was dying alone. I started going to Riverside Park, our bench, Sarah's and mine, to say goodbye. And then one morning, a little girl with Sarah's eyes asked if I was okay. I didn't know who you were at first, Lucy, but something felt familiar. When Richard showed me the photo of Sarah's daughter, I nearly collapsed. The child showing me compassion was Sarah's daughter, the child I'd promised to protect. But here's what I didn't tell anyone, Lucy. George paused, voice breaking. When Sarah was pregnant, she wasn't sure who the father was. The timeline was close. She'd been with me, then briefly with your biological father. She refused to let me take responsibility until she could be certain. She promised a paternity test after the baby was born. Richard leaned forward, barely breathing, but Sarah and I lost touch. Years passed. When she contacted me from the hospital, she told me she'd taken a DNA test when you were 2. She had it done without telling anyone. And Lucy, the test showed that I am your biological father. The room went silent. George stared at the letter. Sarah never told anyone because she'd married someone else, built a life. But on her deathbed, she told me, William, Lucy is yours. I'm sorry. Please take care of her if anything happens. George looked up at Richard. Lucy is William's daughter. Keep reading, Richard urged. I wanted to take you immediately, William wrote, but the doctors said 6 months at most. What kind of father would I be if I entered your life only to die? What trauma would that cause? You had George, a loving grandfather. How could I disrupt that? So I made a different choice. I would watch over you from a distance. Ensure your financial future, and die quietly, having done at least one thing right, protecting my daughter. But then you came to the park. You saw me. You cared. I realized Sarah was right about you. You had her heart, her kindness. If I can't be your father in life, at least I can be your father in death. George Harper gave you love when I couldn't. He deserves to raise you. But the trust fund, that's my responsibility. That's what a father does. He provides. He protects. So, Lucy, know that you were loved. Your mother loved you. I loved you from the moment I learned you existed. And George Harper is the real hero. He showed up every day. He earned the title of Dad. I was just a man who tried to do right in the end. All my love, your father, William. George set the letter down, body shaking. Richard sat in stunned silence. All this time, George said, Lucy was his daughter, and he never said anything. Because he loved her, Richard said quietly. Because he put her needs first. Because he knew you were the father she needed. George picked up the small box. Inside was a DNA test confirming William Chase's paternity, and beneath it, photographs. William holding newborn Lucy at the hospital, taken in secret while Sarah slept, his face filled with wonder and heartbreak. He was there, George whispered, the day she was born. And he never told anyone, Richard said. He protected Sarah's secret. George looked up, jaw set with determination. Marcus Webb doesn't get to take this away. This letter proves William knew exactly what he was doing. He was taking care of his daughter. Richard nodded. With this evidence, Marcus's challenge falls apart. William wasn't making an impulsive decision for a stranger. He was protecting his own child. What do we do? We go to court, Richard said, and we make sure William Chase's final act as a father stands. The courtroom was packed 3 weeks later. Marcus Webb sat with his corporate lawyers looking confident. George and Richard sat across from them, with Lucy, now 7, sitting quietly between them. Judge Patricia Reeves, stern and in her 60s, reviewed the arguments critically. Mr. Webb, you're challenging the trust on the grounds William Chase was not of sound mind, correct? Yes, Your Honor, Marcus said smoothly. William was dying on heavy medications, emotionally compromised. He created a $5 million trust for a child he'd known less than a week. Not rational for a man who'd made careful decisions his entire life. Judge Reeves turned to Richard. Mr. Morrison, how do you respond? Your Honor, I have medical evaluations showing Mr. Chase was fully competent. I also have evidence that his decision was neither impulsive nor irrational. It was, in fact, the most rational decision of his life. And what evidence is that? Richard stood. Your Honor, I'd like to present a letter written by William Chase for Lucy Harper's 18th birthday. This letter contains information that fundamentally changes this case. Objection, Marcus's attorney called. Hearsay. The letter is in Mr. Chase's handwriting, verifiable through analysis, Richard countered. It's accompanied by DNA test results from an accredited laboratory, certified documents, not hearsay. Judge Reeves leaned forward. DNA test results? Yes, Your Honor. Richard approached with the documents. William Chase was Lucy Harper's biological father. The courtroom erupted. Marcus's face went white. George held Lucy close, whispering reassurances. Judge Reeves studied the documents in silence. These appear legitimate. Mr. Webb, did you know? Marcus stammered. No, Your Honor. William never... Because he was protecting Lucy's mother's privacy, Richard explained. Sarah Harper was engaged when Lucy was born. She kept William's paternity private. William honored that choice, even after Sarah's death. He was dying and didn't want to traumatize Lucy by entering her life. Instead, he ensured her financial future through the trust. Judge Reeves looked at Marcus. So Mr. Chase wasn't leaving his fortune to a stranger. He was providing for his daughter. Your Honor, even if true, Marcus argued desperately, it doesn't change that William was dying, medicated. I disagree, Judge Reeves said sharply. This evidence shows perfect clarity. He discovered he had a daughter. Her mother died, leaving the child with an elderly grandfather struggling with 3 jobs and crushing debt. Any father would want to provide under those circumstances. The fact Mr. Chase did so thoughtfully, with structured trusts and safeguards, shows sound judgment, not impairment. She turned to Richard. Anything else? Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to call George Harper. George took the witness stand nervously. Richard approached gently. Mr. Harper, when did you learn William Chase was Lucy's biological father? 3 weeks ago, when I opened his letter. Before that, what did you think motivated the trust? I thought he was honoring Sarah's memory, being kind to a child who'd shown him kindness. And now, knowing the truth? George's voice strengthened. Now I know he was being a father. Maybe he couldn't raise Lucy or tell her the truth, but he did what any father would. He provided for his daughter, education, security, a future. Richard nodded. Final question. Are you asking this court to uphold the trust because you want the money? George looked directly at the judge. I'm asking this court to uphold it because it's what William wanted. Because Lucy is his daughter, and he had the right to care for her. The money isn't what matters, it's what it represents. A father's love. Judge Reeves held up her hand before Marcus's attorney could cross-examine. I've heard enough. Mr. Webb, I understand your concerns. But the evidence is clear. William Chase was Lucy Harper's father. He established the trust with full knowledge. He was competent, thoughtful, and acting in his daughter's best interest. Your challenge is denied. The trust stands. The gavel came down. Marcus slumped, defeated. George pulled Lucy into his arms, both crying with relief. Outside, Richard shook George's hand. William would be proud. "He fought for us first," George said. "I just returned the favor." That evening, Lucy was quiet, processing everything. Finally, she asked, "Grandpa, Mr. William was my daddy?" George's heart broke. "Yes, sweet pea, he was your biological father. But he wanted me to raise you because he loved you. He knew I could give you what he couldn't: time, attention, a normal childhood." Did my mama love him? Very much. And he loved her. They just couldn't make it work. But they both loved you more than anything. Lucy retrieved Courage Bear, holding it close. "I wish I'd known. I would have told him I loved him too." "He knew, Lucy," George said, pulling her close. "When you sat with him, shared your cookie, drew him pictures, he knew. You gave him the greatest gift a daughter can give a father. You let him know he mattered." Lucy snuggled into his arms. "I'm glad he was my daddy, but I'm also glad you're my grandpa. I need both of you." "And you have both of us," George assured her. "In different ways, but you have both of us." As Lucy slept, George looked at William's letter one more time. The final paragraph read, "George, if you're reading this, the truth is out. Thank you for fighting for Lucy. Thank you for being the father I couldn't be. You gave me my daughter, even if only for a few precious days. I am forever in your debt." George folded the letter carefully. William Chase had given them security, opportunity, a future. But the greatest gift was something William might not have realized. He'd shown George that family isn't just about blood. It's about showing up. It's about sacrifice. It's about love in action. And in that truth, both men, the grandfather who raised her and the father who protected her from afar, had given Lucy everything she needed. 12 years later, Lucy Harper stood on stage at Harvard University, her graduation cap perfectly placed, honors cords draped across her shoulders. At 23, she'd just completed her master's in social work, specializing in elder care advocacy. In the audience, George Harper, now 80, sat in the front row, tears streaming down his face. Beside him sat Richard Morrison, who'd become family over the years, and board members from the William Chase Foundation Lucy had helped establish. "When I was 6 years old," Lucy began her valedictorian speech, voice steady, "I met a dying man on a park bench. He was lonely, sick, ready to give up. I didn't know he was a millionaire or my biological father. I just saw someone who needed a friend." The auditorium was silent. "That man, William Chase, taught me the most important lesson. Everyone deserves to be seen. The homeless person on the corner, the elderly neighbor living alone, the sick patient in the hospital, they're all human beings who matter. Sometimes the simplest act of kindness can change everything." Lucy touched the small pin on her lapel, a tiny park bench given by Richard on her 18th birthday. "William left me a trust fund that paid for this education, but more importantly, he left me a mission. Real wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the lives we touch, the people we see, the kindness we extend." She looked at George, eyes shining. "My grandfather taught me that too. He worked himself to exhaustion to give me a childhood. He sacrificed everything for my opportunities. He showed me what real love looks like, showing up day after day, even when it's hard." George wiped his eyes, heart overflowing. "Today, as I prepare to work with isolated seniors, I make this promise. I will see the invisible. I will extend kindness to those the world has forgotten. I will honor the legacy of two fathers, one who raised me with unwavering dedication and one who protected me from afar with silent sacrifice." The audience erupted in applause. Lucy walked straight to George, who stood shakily to embrace her. "I'm so proud of you, sweet pea," George whispered, voice breaking. "Your mama would be so proud. William would be so proud." "I couldn't have done this without you, Grandpa," Lucy said, holding him tight. "You're my hero." Later, Richard pulled Lucy aside. "There's something I've been holding for 12 years. He handed her a small wooden box containing a letter in William's handwriting, dated the day before he died. "My dearest Lucy," the letter began. "If you're reading this, you've graduated. I'm so proud of you, even though I'll never see the woman you've become. You have your mother's heart, her kindness, her ability to change the world, one person at a time." Lucy's hands trembled. "I want you to know why I never told you the truth while I was alive. It wasn't because I didn't love you. I loved you from the moment I learned you existed. But you had George, and he was everything a father should be. He showed up. He sacrificed. He loved you unconditionally. You needed him, not a dying stranger with money. I hope the financial security I provided gave you freedom to pursue your passions, to make a difference, to change lives the way you changed mine. There's a saying, a society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they'll never sit in. That's what I tried to do for you, Lucy. So live boldly, my darling daughter. See the invisible. Extend kindness without expecting anything in return. Change the world one person at a time, the way you changed mine. You are loved by your mother, by George, and by me. All my love, always and forever, Dad." Lucy clutched the letter to her chest, tears flowing. Richard put a comforting hand on her shoulder. "He loved you so much." "I know," Lucy whispered, "and I promise I'll make him proud." And she did. Over the next decade, Lucy became a nationally recognized elder care advocate. She founded the See Me program, connecting isolated seniors with young volunteers for weekly visits, park bench conversations, just like hers with William. The program spread to 40 states, changing thousands of lives. She wrote a best-selling book titled The Man on the Bench, telling William's story and inspiring a movement of compassionate connection. All proceeds went to the William Chase Foundation. She married a kind social worker named David and had 3 children. She taught each of them the lesson William had taught her. Everyone deserves to be seen. George lived to see it all. He passed peacefully at 92, holding Lucy's hand, telling her one last time how proud he was. At his funeral, Lucy placed a drawing on his casket, the same one she'd drawn for William. 2 stick figures on a bench, surrounded by hearts. Best friends forever. On the first anniversary of George's passing, Lucy returned to Riverside Park with her children. The memorial bench was still there. A new plaque had been added, in memory of George Harper, who showed us that the greatest wealth is love in action. Lucy's oldest daughter, Sarah, named after her grandmother, looked up. "Mommy, why are we sitting on this bench?" Lucy smiled, pulling her close. "Because this is where magic happened, sweetheart. This is where a lonely man found hope. This is where kindness changed everything. This is where our family's real story began." As they sat in the afternoon sunshine, a homeless man approached hesitantly. Lucy's daughter looked at him with her mother's compassionate eyes and asked the same question Lucy had asked William. "Are you okay?" Lucy watched, tears streaming, as her daughter extended kindness to a stranger. The cycle continued. The legacy lived on. William Chase had been right. A society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they'll never sit in. He'd planted a tree of kindness, of purpose, of love. And now, decades later, countless people were finding shelter in its shade. His fortune had changed Lucy's life, but Lucy's kindness had changed his death. And together, they'd created something that would outlast them both, a legacy of seeing the invisible, of extending grace, of choosing love over indifference. As Lucy sat on that bench with her children, she felt William's presence and George's presence surrounding her like a warm embrace. They were both there, watching, proud, at peace. "Thank you," Lucy whispered to the wind. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for teaching me that the smallest act of kindness can change the world." And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, William Chase and George Harper smiled. Their little girl had understood the lesson. She'd become exactly who they'd hoped she'd be. She'd become love in action.